A billionaire heir vanishes in the middle of Manhattan. Hours later, a ransom note arrives demanding millions, more than any Canadian family had ever been asked to pay. The tabloids screamed, "Canada's royal family is under siege." But behind the headlines, something bigger was happening. Because this wasn't just a kidnapping. It was a glimpse into the hidden world of dynasties that rarely make the front page, but quietly control what Canadians eat, drink, read, and even believe. From whiskey fortunes born in Prohibition speakeasies to potato fields that turned into a global French fry empire, to grocery aisles where prices were rigged without shoppers knowing, these families built power that doesn't trend online, but it shapes everyday life in ways we almost never see. And here's the twist. Once you start pulling on their stories, you realize they all connect. Through politics, through scandals, through boardrooms that look more like royal courts than corporate offices. So, how did beer brewers, bakers, and farmers end up wielding the kind of influence politicians only dream about? And what secrets do these dynasties still keep buried?
2 centuries earlier, a young immigrant named John Molson stepped off a boat and did what scrappy founders always do. He started building. In 1786, on the banks of the St. Lawrence River, he set up a brewery that would grow into the oldest in North America. Then came something wilder, a steamboat called Accommodation, the first in Canada to make a commercial voyage. Picture the pitch deck. We'll shrink a 2-day river slog into a predictable schedule, and then, by the way, we'll help fund a public hospital. Molson didn't stop. He backed the Champlain and St. Lawrence Railroad, Canada's first railway, because he saw that if you speed up how people move, you speed up everything else: money, ideas, entire cities. That instinct, to lay infrastructure and sell to the public riding on it, became a kind of template. He wasn't just a brewer. He was laying down the arteries of a nation: hospitals, universities, shipping routes. Molson left fingerprints everywhere. Today, the Molson name sits on cans in garage fridges across the continent, and the family's stake in hockey. Their family helped anchor the Montreal Canadiens as a cultural institution. It's quiet power with main character energy. But ask yourself this: how did one immigrant brewer's side hustles turn into a dynasty that still holds cultural power over 200 years later? To answer that, we need to look at another immigrant family, one that traded in mozzarella instead of beer. You see how milk and mozzarella became a global passport and scaled faster than most tech startups today? In the 1950s, another immigrant family rolled into Montreal with $500, a bicycle, and old-world know-how. Lino Saputo and his parents. His first business tool? A bicycle. That was enough to deliver handmade mozzarella and ricotta to Montreal's growing Italian neighborhoods. Those deliveries by bike turned into a growth playbook most founders would copy today: relentless product focus, then acquisitions, then scale across borders. Small beginnings, yes. But here's the thing. While most family dairies stayed local, Saputo expanded like a Silicon Valley startup. Through acquisitions, they consolidated dozens of smaller dairies, creating a distribution network that reached every corner of Canada. Then they went global, into the US, Australia, even Argentina. Saputo Inc. is now one of the 10 largest dairy producers in the world. Their cheese is in American grocery aisles right now, whether you realize it or not. And while the family maintains control, their empire shows how immigrant grit can be scaled into something bigger than anyone could imagine. The family gave their name to a soccer stadium in Montreal, which means every goal, every chant, every viral overhead kick carries a piece of a family cheese shop that refused to stay small. It's got that American dream but North vibe. And yet, the real lesson isn't just growth. It's sticky. Cheese is a habit. Stadiums are a ritual. Together, that's culture. Still, if dairy can conquer continents, what could one humble vegetable do with a freezer and a distribution map that looked like a spider web? Around the same time, in a rural town of New Brunswick,
a pair of brothers were cooking up a revolution from a potato field. Head east to a tiny town in New Brunswick, where a set of brothers bet on cold. They took the everyday potato and taught it to fly through time, across oceans, straight into fast food kitchens and home ovens. If you've eaten French fries at a fast food chain in the US, odds are you've eaten a McCain product. In 1957, Harrison and Wallace McCain took a gamble on a new technology, freezing, and turned it on the humble potato. The result? McCain Foods became the world's largest frozen French fry producer. McCain Foods scaled frozen fries the way Silicon Valley scales code. Plants went up around the world, and before long the company could credibly claim that 1 in every 4 fries on Earth was theirs. That's highway billboard famous. They expanded to the UK in the 60s, then to Australia, the US, and beyond. Today, McCain operates in over 160 countries. But behind the crispy fries was a family feud so intense it nearly tore the company apart. The succession battle between the McCain brothers in the 90s became a Canadian corporate legend, with each side maneuvering for control of the empire. Even today, the company still finds itself in the occasional legal headline, because when you're the biggest, everyone watches your every move. Scale brings power. Power brings scrutiny. And that's why a lot of old money learns to go quiet, which is exactly what another Prairie dynasty did, preferring elevators to microphones. If the McCains sold fries to the world, the Richardsons sold the grain that made those fries possible. Their empire started in 1857 when James Richardson began trading wheat in Kingston, Ontario. On the prairies, the Richardsons built a fortune the old-school way, one grain car at a time, trusting farmers through good years and brutal ones. They started in Kingston, followed the wheat west, and became the kind of private, multi-sector holding company that bankers speak about in polite tones, James Richardson and Sons, today one of Canada's most powerful private companies. They built grain elevators across the prairies, dominated agricultural markets, and then spread their influence into oil, gas, banking, and real estate, including Richardson Wealth. But here's the twist: they did it all in near total silence. Unlike flashy billionaires, the Richardson dynasty avoided headlines, preferring a low-profile strategy of steady, long-term growth. Generations later, the family still controls the company. And in Winnipeg, their fingerprints are everywhere. From museums to hospitals, they are the classic stealth wealth dynasty. What keeps it durable is the same insight as Molson's Railroad. If you move the essentials of life, you don't need to trend on TikTok. You just need to keep showing up, harvest after harvest. But sometimes the retail floor is where reputations are forged and sold. Which brings us to a glam department store that taught Montreal how to shop, long before your phone tried to do it for you. Before Amazon, before Walmart, department stores were temples of consumerism. In 1845, Henry Morgan opened a dry goods store in Montreal, took the Paris department store idea and transplanted it to Montreal, turning window displays into theater and shopping into an afternoon. It grew into Morgan's, the first true department store chain in Canada. Luxurious, modern, and elegant, Morgan's was a shopping empire that defined Canadian retail. The family dominated for decades, reshaping the city's retail core, until one of the oldest brands in North America, the Hudson's Bay Company, Canada's oldest retailer, acquired Morgan's in 1960. The flag on the building changed. The sale gave the Morgans immense wealth, but at the cost of losing control of the empire they had built. The retail era moved on, but the money didn't vanish. It evolved, flowed into trusts, into real estate, into quieter investments. This is the hidden map of old money. Assets morph, but influence finds a new room to sit in. Their story is a cautionary tale. Wealth can outlive influence, But legacy doesn't always survive the marketplace. The question is, what does influence look like when one family stitches an entire region's economy together? Fuel to forests, ships to newspapers, the next dynasty shows us what happens when one family refuses to let go, controlling almost every part of an entire region's economy. In Atlantic Canada, the Irving name is almost a weather system. Gas stations along the highway, an oil refinery in St. John, the largest in the country, shipyards, trucking, forests stacking into mills, stacking into tissue, stacking into paper, even the newspapers that covered his business. It's a vertically integrated machine, control every link energy, that turns a family into an ecosystem. For decades, their media arm dominated New Brunswick's newsstands, a concentration that drew loud debate until the newspapers were sold to Post Media in 2022. The oil side is still massive, a 320,000 barrels per day refinery feeding the East Coast, plus Ireland's only refinery in Whitegate. Arthur Irving, the leader of that branch, passed away in 2024, but not before embedding the brand into the fabric of the Maritimes. Today, Irving Oil is one of the largest privately owned companies in Canada. Their refinery in St. John is the largest in the country, and their family empire extends into forestry, paper, transportation, and food. In New Brunswick, their dominance is so complete that people call them modern-day feudal lords. Their influence hasn't been without controversy. Accusations of monopoly power, environmental damage, and political manipulations swirl around their name. But love them or hate them, the Irvings have proven one thing: control every step of the supply chain, and you control the region itself. When industry stacks up like that, politics is never far away. Which is why the next family didn't just build companies, they built relationships at cabinet table level. Another family made their fortune from something far less wholesome: prohibition. When prohibition swept across the United States, alcohol was outlawed. But just north of the border in Canada, it was still legal to produce. Samuel Bronfman saw the opportunity and built Seagram's, one of the largest distilleries in the world. Officially, he sold to distributors. Unofficially, a lot of that liquor ended up smuggled into American speakeasies. And when Prohibition ended, they were holding the aged stock everyone suddenly wanted. That's chess, not checkers. The Bronfmans turned vice into fortune, and their whiskey brands, Crown Royal, Chivas Regal, became global icons. But the family's story took darker turns, with rumors of mob ties, blackmail, and political influence. Decades later, a sensational kidnapping of Samuel Bronfman II shoved the family into the harshest spotlight. The trials became soap opera fodder. Accusations, defense theories, juries split enough to keep people arguing over coffee for years. By the 1990s, Edgar Bronfman Jr. made a disastrous bet, selling off their liquor business to dive into Hollywood, climaxing in the Vivendi deal. They bought Universal Studios, but the gamble backfired spectacularly. Billions were lost, and the Seagram empire crumbled. And yet the name still lives everywhere. Philanthropy, finance, and headlines again in 2020 when a Bronfman heir was sentenced for crimes tied to a toxic self-help cult that dragged a whole cast of characters into federal court. It's the kind of arc that feels like a prestige TV season packed into a century. Rise, reinvention, scandal, fallout. And if the Bronfmans reveal the risk of ambition, the Desmarais dynasty reveals the power of patience and politics. In the 1960s, Paul Desmarais Sr. took control of a struggling Canadian bus company. From there, he built Power Corporation,
a fortress of financial services giant that today controls insurance, investment, and wealth management firms across Canada. Great-West Lifeco is part of that universe. So is IGM. And yes, the fintech world too. A majority stake in Wealthsimple has put the family behind a platform that shows up on your phone every time markets trend on X. The other lever here is social capital. But money was only half the game. The Desmarais family built unmatched political connections. Paul Desmarais Sr. advised prime ministers, married into political dynasties, and created a network that linked the family directly to Canadian power. Even today, their influence flows not just through stock markets, but through cabinet rooms in Ottawa. Think of it as quiet luxury for policy. No flashy logos, just the soft power of dinners, boards, and phone calls that get returned. If your vibe is, tell me you run the country without saying you run the country, this is it. But while finance can be subtle, another family builds power in a way you can feel with your shopping cart, your medicine cabinet, even the loaf of bread on your counter. And that story comes with a plot twist.
George Weston was once just a baker's apprentice in Toronto. By 1882, he owned his own bakery. His descendants turned that bakery into George Weston Limited, a global retail empire. The crown jewel? Loblaws, the largest grocery chain in Canada. Add Shoppers Drug Mart and the no-name/President's Choice brands, and the Weston name is basically stamped onto every Canadian kitchen and bathroom. The family owned luxury department stores like Holt Renfrew and even Selfridges in the UK until recently. For decades, Galen Weston was the face of Canadian retail dominance. But here's the twist. In 2017, Loblaw admitted to participating in a years-long bread price-fixing scheme, handing out $25 gift cards as part of the fallout, and inviting public fury that still echoes. Leadership has shifted since. Galen Weston moved out of the president's chair at Loblaw in 2023 as a new CEO stepped in. And the machine keeps humming, but with critics watching closely. The lesson? Old money adapts because it has to. Their empire feeding and supplying tens of millions daily. The brand stands, the aisle end caps stay stocked, but the reputational math gets harder, which brings us to the quiet final boss of this whole story. A family that pivoted from newspapers to data streams so valuable they look less like media and more like electricity. The Thomsons are a masterclass in strategic patience. In the 1930s, during the Great Depression, Roy Thomson started with a small-town radio station, bought struggling papers, expanded to the UK, then made the decisive turn out of print into information. By the 1950s, he was a media baron, owning papers in Canada and Britain, including the Sunday Times. His success was so immense, he became a British lord. The family's holding company, Woodbridge, controls Thomson Reuters, the global giant that pipes legal, tax, risk, and financial data to the desks that run modern capitalism. The news division carries the legacy and prestige. The money is in the tools. Today, the Thomson family controls a vast media empire with investments in telecommunications, financial data, and newspapers. Over time, they also took full control of the Globe and Mail, Canada's most influential newspaper, because it turns out old money still likes to keep one hand on the national conversation. And if you ever wondered how power compounds, consider that after selling down a chunk of their financial data arm to form Refinitiv, the chain eventually linked into the London Stock Exchange, an elegant proof that the Thomsons now play in systems, not headlines. Their fortune is estimated in the tens of billions, making them Canada's richest family by far. And unlike other dynasties, the Thomson mastered the art of staying invisible. They rarely appear in the press, rarely give interviews, and yet control one of the most important commodities on Earth, information. It's, if you know on a global scale. Which is the point. These families don't just own companies, they own feedback loops. After all the kidnappings and courtrooms, the boycotts and bread cards, the stadium cheers and balance sheet pivots, what we're left with is a simple pattern. Build something people do every day. Make it faster, cheaper, or simply there when they need it. Then, use the cash to buy the infrastructure around it. Tracks, trucks, terminals, data pipes, even newspapers. If the map starts at a brewery dock in 1786, it stretches through dairy cases, freezer aisles, farm roads, refinery stacks, downtown display windows, pension funds, and newsrooms. It's one long supply chain of trust. And that's the quiet reveal. In Canada, the power behind the brand on your shelf or the byline on your phone is often a last name that's been paying attention for a very long time. Old money here doesn't just inherit, it iterates. The Molsons took a river and made it move. The Saputos took a neighborhood and made it global. The McCains took a crop and built a freezer empire. The Richardsons took a harvest and built a backbone. The Morgans turned shopping into theater, then handed the stage to an older banner. The Irvings stitched a region together with pipelines and pulp. The Bronfmans rose on whiskey, survived scandal, and scattered into new arenas. The Desmarais network mastered the boardroom. The Westons scaled the aisle. The Thomsons turned information into the commodity that powers all the rest. So when you pick up a loaf of bread, scroll a headline, swipe to invest, fill your tank on a road trip, or watch a Friday night game where the arena crowd sings along, there's a decent chance your life just brushed against a legacy that started with a choice, not a birthright. That's the closure, a loop back to the root note. But make no mistake, their power is stitched into the everyday lives of millions. And as new industries rise and fall, their stories remind us that true dynasties don't just chase the moment, they build for centuries. They learned, they diversified, they stayed. And if history is any guide, they'll still be here, quieter than the news, louder than you think, long after this video ends.